What we're doing today is we're just stressing the importance of knowing your surroundings, knowing your community. You know, there's a lot of people, I think nowadays in particular, who just don't know their neighborhoods. Now, if you grew up in your neighborhood, you probably know it quite well because you walked to school as a kid. But it's also important that you know the broader surroundings and you know the places of interest if things were to get weird, if things were to get squirrely. Do you know who the problem people are in your block? Imagine yourself in a disaster situation. You're a few weeks in. Who are the people on your street that are going to be problematic? Who are the people in your community that are going to be problematic? Where are the hot spots going to be? So there's two ways to look at post-collapse scavenging. Everybody's gonna go for the low-hanging fruit first, right? So everybody's gonna go to the convenience store, the drugstore, the grocery store, places they know. They're not gonna go to the lesser obvious places. A way to avoid the mob is to simply start further down the supply chain. So the further down the supply chain you go, the less resistance you're probably gonna encounter. So we're talking about train yards, shipping yards, consolidated distribution centers, places where items and food is distributed from as opposed to the end retail outlets. Grocery stores will be cleaned out in the first 3 days. Grocery stores only have enough food on hand for about 3 days of shopping. They get resupplied more frequently than people realize. They don't keep any inventory in the back anymore because we have something called the just-in-time delivery system, which means that because we have such an efficient logistical system while the grid is up, places don't need backroom storage anymore. There was a time when they actually needed storage in the back. But nowadays, when the store runs out, they just reorder something, and it's quick, but as soon as that supply chain hits a snag, then there's big problems. So we're just gonna drive around and see if we can find potential places of interest. If 90% of people die, there's gonna be a lot of stuff laying around and you wanna know where it is. You wanna know where the most important things are. So up here, we have a little bit of a solar installation. If this place was ever abandoned after SHTF, you would have a lot of photovoltaics. So this is where I'm coming to charge my Tesla after the shizzy hits the fizzy. Those solar panels are putting out zero power because they are completely covered in snow. But that is going to be a very valuable place if things get bad. Now this building right here, I've always thought that this is an amazing apocalypse building. Look at that building. That's like concrete. Very few windows on the sides. You have a lot of overhead doors that you'd have to maybe seal up. That's a very nice building for fortifications. You already have barbed wire. The windows in the front are just the administrative section of the building, but all around there's very few windows and it's a very strong building. On the roof of that building, you could put solar panels and nobody would be able to see. That's the one thing with solar arrays is you don't really want them on the ground. You want them kind of out of sight. Otherwise they attract attention, right? You could keep watch because it's a nice flat roof. You know, you could do a lot on the roof itself. So yeah, that's just a very ideal building for SHTF. Another thing to be aware of is nature reserves and public land. You definitely don't want to be tiptoeing around somebody else's property when the grid is up, or especially when the grid is down. If you go on Crown Land Map Viewer, you can actually find all of the publicly available hunting spots. If you go and Google hunting spots within your region, there's likely going to be a map that shows you different places that are open access, places that you can use for recreational activities or hunting activities. These are going to be areas you can access if you're trying to fish or hunt, set up traps. But you're going to want to know where these places are and you're going to want to go and scout them out. It's worth venturing out for an afternoon and just driving around these regions to get to know them. If you have to go and hunt, it's going to take you gas typically to get to your location. Unless you're already in a rural community and you have your traps and your bait set up, you're going to have to go and get it. So you're going to want to know the closest possible regions that you could do that in. If we're talking about hunting post-disaster, crossbow or bow is ideal, but you don't want to be firing off a shotgun or a large bore rifle. If you don't have to draw attention to yourself, don't do that. Storing food now, it's the 100-to-1 rule. It's way easier to just store food now. I know like hunting and DIY and all that stuff is great. It's great to know. But the fact of the matter is I can go into a wholesale store and drop 40 bucks on a bag of rice that will provide me the calories I need to survive for a month. Do you realize how long it would take you to get that from nature? Like, it would take weeks if you're lucky. So if you're looking for diesel fuel to siphon after SHTF, we're talking about, there's no more rules, there's no more, police, and all the police have died. Then you go to these places with these big trucks, like right here. That's where you're gonna be able to siphon diesel. Yeah, so all of those trucks have diesel in them, and they have a lot of diesel in them.
It's diesel, man. Man, I'm feeling sick, dude.
What's wrong with you guys, anyway? Oh, man, we're sick from all the gas we've been stealing. We should be better in 6 to 8 days, though.
Why, Corey and Trevor, that's highly illegal. You shouldn't be stealing gas, Corey and Trevor.
So that's a place where not a lot of people are gonna think to get fuel. That's what we call high-hanging fruit. It's basically fuel storage without the mobs of people. If there's no electricity, the pumps aren't going to work to pump gas. Those places are going to be hazardous places to be because everybody's going to be going there at the same time. Yeah, like a gas station like this, I don't know exactly what the average capacity is. It's probably not that much. Unless they're getting resupply, something like this is going to run out real quick. The benefit of having a diesel is it lasts a bit longer than gasoline. Not as many cars run on it, so there's going to be a lot more diesel when the shizzy hits the fizzy than gasoline available. If we're really talking about end of the world as we know it situation, the semis are not going to be running. They're not going to be running heavy equipment, but all that diesel is still going to be out there. Most of these fuel storage reservoirs, they have like a cap that's usually concealed on the ground somewhere. It's usually locked, so you'd have to like bust that open. You'd have to have a long siphon hose that you could send down there. If you use something like a water pump and just a long hose, kind of like what we showed on the channel before, you just stick that down there and free gas. You didn't hear that from me though. I would never do such a thing. I would never encourage you to do such a thing. I need to make that clear. We're talking about life or death. And grandma's dying and the kids are screaming and you have no other choice but to steal hundreds of gallons of diesel. What we're seeing here is gentlemen filling up the tanks with diesel. These trucks are not going to be there when the shizzy hits the fizzy. This guy's like, oh no, not again. Because this happens every day to that guy. There's going to be a lot of fuel supply at airports, obviously. But because they're such important places, there's likely going to be too many government agencies and a large military and police presence there, so you're going to probably want to avoid spots like that. Here's the rule, the simple rule of thumb. If you have to evacuate, you live in a major city, in your mind you're thinking, what's the fastest way to get there? You need to think the opposite. The fastest way on your average run-of-the-mill grid up, everything is going fine, it's not the end of the world day, is going to be the absolute slowest way when everybody hits the road at the same time. You don't want to be stuck on some freeway off-ramp, which is what's going to happen because that's the way everybody's been trained to go. You need to think about back alleys, train tracks. Think about what is the slowest way for me to get to work in the mornings. You can actually drive on railroad tracks if the streets were like totally congested, and nobody's going to think about this because everybody's going to be thinking roads. Now you're probably going to need a larger four-wheel drive vehicle, but it's definitely doable. Avoid the major corridors at all costs.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.